you guys are kind of a perfect two people to talk specifically about global soccer, an area that I think kind of sits a little bit differently than other sports like Major League Baseball and the NBA, just because of kind of the global nature of your games. Danny, you work, cover a property ICC that's planning events in Asia, in the US, in Europe during non-COVID years. And I'm curious about how you guys, and Aidan, we'll start with you, how you think about kind of the different challenges, maybe even advantages that you guys have because you think more globally than a lot of other sports leagues and teams.
I think we've shared many of the same pains and challenges as you all on this particular call. We had the fortune of continuing our season. So we had a slight hiatus this time last year, but we managed to get through the entire season and are close to finishing this particular season as well. It's certainly curtailed our stadium. For they opened up our new stadium back in 2019. Unlike some venues in the US, that stadium is both owned and operated by us, and that was just over a £1 billion commitment. The two advantages for us was taking advantage of the technology available to us. So from the start, we were cashless. From the start, we had mobile ticketing entry, and that will just ramp up as we go. And then because we were always in a much more humble stadium, we've managed to build up a great fan base. So we sell out each game. So we don't necessarily have the concerns about fans coming back. But clearly what is very intriguing is about how some customer behaviours may change. What will the buying habits be? Transport, 90% of our fans come by public transport. Much like Yankees, we are stuck, and Danny's seen it. We are dead bang in the middle of the city. So that's another interesting angle for us. But COVID has allowed us to become much more digital and virtual very, very quickly. Only last week we had Gareth Bale in an appearance with our Indian fan base doing a virtual Q&A. That would never happen kind of pre-COVID, but COVID has sped up that digital transformation that we've all been doing for 5-10 years. We've managed to deliver things in a matter of months that would otherwise take years to deliver.
Give us a sense in how, in as much detail as you can, how important the live experience is from a financial standpoint for Tottenham. Here in the US, some Major League Baseball team owners say 70% of their revenue is in-game. For the NFL, it's a lot less. What is it for a big global soccer team like Tottenham?
We're about a third. So a third match day, a third broadcast, and a third partnership and sponsorship. But the live event and the live crowd clearly amplifies the value of the broadcast product and also enhances the value of the rights that we can bring to sponsors and partners, which is incredible for us. Clearly, the loss of matchday revenue has been hard for us all, particularly hard when we opened the stadium back in 2019. I think we've now played more games in an empty stadium than a full one. What is also very hard, and not just because he's sitting in front of me here, but not being able to travel internationally. One of the major benefits we have, and particularly by working with someone like Danny and his team at Relevent, is to be able to travel the world in the off-season, being able to go to Singapore events. They are tourism events. Singapore welcomes fans from 20 markets across APAC. So not being able to travel has been particularly hard for us. And I say that with responsibility for our international tour program as well. So I've been indoors for 12 months now.
So Danny, expand on that. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think you told me a little while ago that about 50% of ICC revenue comes from the in-ticket experience. I know you guys are still looking at what 2021, what that event looks like. Can you give us an update on where that stands?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from our standpoint, we're still working with the Asian government as it relates to China, Singapore, and Asian Pacific on stadium regulation. I can tell you that they are a lot stricter than the United States as it relates to stadium capacities. So places like Florida and Texas are entirely different than Singapore and China. So I would say it's highly unlikely that we'll be able to return to events at full scale in Asia and in this summer of 2021. Whereas in the United States, we're looking at bringing some great marquee rivalry matchups to the U.S. Obviously, we'll focus on working in states like Florida or Texas, where we know that we can fill the stadium to capacity. I know that the Texas Rangers were actually exploring opening day, and obviously down in South Florida, they're continuing to ramp up the number of fans in stadiums. So for us, it's really this summer about getting fans back in events and providing them an experience like they typically had. Obviously, with the spread of the vaccine, we feel very confident we'll be able to fill stadiums by July and August.
And you just heard Aidan talking about kind of the difficulties of travel. What's the bigger hurdle here? Is it local governments and stadium restrictions, or is it getting clubs like Tottenham able to make that travel, that trip to Asia or that trip to Florida or Texas?
I think it's two things. It's one, managing risk on our side in terms of not having any foresight or ability to plan against what stadiums will be able to do in terms of filling to what capacity, and then understanding what ticket prices you can charge and what you can do to get fans back, but also in order to underwrite the events and be able to bring them over here. And then it's also talking to peers like Aidan and getting them to focus on something other than making sure all of their players are able to play this weekend or to play in the Champions League or the Europa League, because they have other challenges on their day-to-day that are very important as it relates to safety protocols. So I'd say it's both from a financial standpoint and then making sure that our partners in the clubs are able to do the planning necessary to make it work.
One of the things, and Aidan, I want to get your thoughts here. One of the things that we've kind of danced around a lot in this entire panel, the idea that there's kind of two requirements for bringing fans back. You want to ensure their safety, and you also want to ensure that they feel safe. And those are not always directly the same thing. How do you, Aidan, think about, as more fans are going to be coming back to the Tottenham Stadium, how you balance those two things? Is one more important than the other? Kind of where those two balance out?
It's a great question. I think what we all need to do is communicate on a very, very regular basis. I think one of the benefits, again, from our particular venue and the customer base we have at the moment, it is a regular visitor. So of our capacity of 62,000, we have 40,000 season ticket holders. So they're coming every 7 and 14 days. So they know their transport routes. They know how they like to experience the stadium, and we'll be able to educate them quickly on any particular nuances around flows in the building, particular sections that maybe we have kind of red, amber, green zones in our building at the moment as well. So I think kind of security and perception of safety go absolutely hand in hand. Because we have a new stadium, it's a lot easier for us as well to convince people they can be safe. You know, contactless entry, contactless payments, all of those things stand us in much better stead. But some of the venues in the UK, much like America, they'll be 100 years old, 80 years old. So I think we're coming at it from a very different perspective, fortunately, than many others, both in the UK and Europe. But again, social media comes.
What has happened with the frequency of conversation or communication between you and your fan base? Has it increased during the pandemic?
We're communicating, I think, much more on a social media basis. So we have doubled down on the content we're producing. We've got 45 million social media followers, a database just north of 5 million and over 200,000 members. So when they can't come to the stadium, it is more important than ever to keep them engaged. And we've seen that with the popularity of our content across all of our channels. I think it is it's going to be critical as people come back into the building that we're referencing how to buy tickets, if it's balloted, how that balloting process works, how to come to the stadium and recommended routes. We do all of those things as norm, but certainly something to be much more sharper at as we head into May and June, and crowds coming back into buildings in the UK.
Danny, media is something that you guys are obviously really focused on as well in the past 12 months. New studio in Mexico. You're producing documentary series, ESPN Plus as well. Is that kind of one of the enduring, legacies here? Do you think that the acceleration towards sports properties as media companies as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're familiar with how talented Boris is on our joint venture with La Liga, and that's a core business for us now. And as Aidan's very familiar, we've been trying for years to look at what's happening with the consolidating media market in Europe. So for us, taking advantage of how do we create an international marketing platform for both club brands, league brands, and ultimately governing bodies, for us has been something we've been looking at for 5 or 6 years. We started in the event space. We ultimately moved into brand representation and media through our joint venture with La Liga. When COVID happened and there were no matches, we just had to move a lot faster in terms of connecting with fans over social media. Same point that Aidan just made with the Spurs, tapping into our database and producing a lot more content, engaging with fans and bringing them the sport closer to home, because they obviously couldn't watch in the same way. So for us, I can tell you that while it was very obviously difficult and we were severely challenged with no events, our media business was thriving. We were actually hiring. So for us, I'd say that one of the huge areas that we're going to double down is how do we help the stakeholders, whether it's clubs, leagues, or governing bodies, to utilize our platform both in creating proximity to fans through events, but also through storytelling, be it long form premium content like the Spurs have done so well with their work, or it's short form programming like we produced out of our studio for both men's and women's and youth.
And who do you talk to? I mean, the Relevant obviously has a big relationship with the Dolphins through Stephen Ross. Who are you guys talking to consistently across other leagues and other teams to kind of pitch best practices? What are you learning from other entities about how to do this properly?
So obviously we're talking to clubs in Europe and UEFA and the leagues, the EPL, La Liga, Bundesliga, Ligue 1, and Serie A to learn what's best practice in Europe. But we're speaking predominantly to the Dolphins and understanding what the NFL is doing. Obviously, Steve being the owner of our business and owning the NFL franchise, we're able to quickly understand best practices as it relates to events, production, safety protocol coming out of COVID, content production, and then also learn, we think the NBA has done a phenomenal job in one of the best leagues in our country of storytelling around players and amplifying content for fans. So I'd say that obviously the Dolphins are the first place and the NFL is the number one, but it's learning from our partners abroad and it's learning from other leagues like the NBA.
Aidan, how about you? I mean, are there groups, entities that you guys have been talking to that have been especially insightful or especially helpful as you guys navigate these same questions?
I guess he had enough of you.
Oh. Wow, terrible question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best objection to a question I've seen so far.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah,
but Danny, I love what you brought in, like you brought in the NFL, because as you know, even the medical professionals and the scientists have utilized the data that the leagues were able to collect, because it's a different kind of business. So they do, I would assume, they offer you a wealth of institutional knowledge.
It's incredible. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. Just knowing from the NFL that they're planning to sell out stadiums for the preseason, which is the beginning of August, allows us to actually start planning events, because it gives us more understanding of fan consumption habits in terms of, can we put an event on sale at the beginning of August for our tournament? I mean, ultimately, our business is just creating an international marketing plan for European football. That's it. We do it through proximity to fans with events, or we do it through brand development and storytelling, content development. And I would say the NFL, better than anybody else, and it has to do with their revenue stream, Scott, as you know, makes it a lot easier, is a huge example for what we're trying to do in teaching the European football clubs how do they generate international media dollars so that ultimately they can take advantage of not going backwards like the EPL did in their last cycle because of the consolidation of the media landscape. I think in the end of the day, this is all an exercise about how do you generate more media dollars. And you may do it by talking to fans on the pitch, or you may do it by talking to fans in storytelling and in stands. But that's why the NFL goes to London or Monterey, and that's why the NBA goes to Europe or China. And that's why we feel our platform is important to the European football clubs and leagues.